Welcome to the Epic Mercury Show. I am your host, Epic Mercury. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about something that has been a concern for me for years. And I think it's some of the more nuanced attitudes toward psychic abilities and psychic perception that the general public just might not think about. In some ways, I guess you could say I'm asking you to empathize with somebody who has genuine psychic abilities a little bit more, because there's, this popular opinion, especially in our trendy, pop-oriented, TikTok 8-second video society that we have that, short attention span, that anybody who has psychic abilities would be famous, they'd be wealthy, everything would be fantastic, their life would be wonderful. As somebody who has been either blessed or cursed, as the case may be, with psychic abilities, I think there's some things that the general public does not think about, some of the nuances and some of the drawbacks about being psychic, and I would like to discuss those a little bit on the show today. This is just simply a much more complex topic, much more nuanced topic than I think a lot of people want to take into account. So I decided to ask Gemini, the current large language model that I'm using at the moment, about psychic abilities, and I got the standard answer that there is no scientific data or support for psychic abilities. So I decided to ask the question a little bit differently and ask it, if they were real, what would be the pros and the cons of basically concealing or revealing those psychic abilities? And I got a much more nuanced answer. And this kind of helped me process through this. So I'm going to be reading part of that answer and responding based on my experience with psychic abilities, having been a psychic from the time I was a child. I don't think that the output, the articulation, is necessarily the best articulation of the argument, but I found it quite useful to process through some of this information. And I will give you some information from my experience when I was younger, and maybe explain a little bit about psychic abilities. And, in some ways, maybe what I would like also is for this particular episode to reach people who have some psychic talent. They might not know exactly how their abilities work, what they're capable of perceiving, how the information comes through, why they seem to be very on target at points, very correct, and other times they seem to be very wrong. I would like this to be an exploration in that direction. And this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode for that reason. So the question I asked Gemini is, if psychic abilities were real, would it be better for the intuitive to keep this knowledge to themselves or display it for others? And this is what Gemini came back with. This is a fascinating and complex question. The decision of whether to reveal or conceal psychic abilities, if they were real, would involve a deep consideration of ethical, social, and personal factors. There isn't a single better answer, as the optimal choice would depend on specific circumstances and the individual's values. Let's explore some of the arguments. So I'm going to go over a quick synopsis of the arguments, both for concealment and revealing, and then go into the nuances of discussing those along with my experience as a psychic. So, arguments for keeping the knowledge to themselves. 1, preservation of personal peace and autonomy. 2, avoidance of fear and prejudice. 3, ethical considerations of free will. 4, the burden of responsibility. Arguments for displaying knowledge or revelation. 1, potential for greater good. 2, advancement of science and understanding. 3, building trust and community. 4, personal integrity and honesty. So now I'm going to go back and discuss each one of these, or read the sections under these. The first one, preservation of personal peace and autonomy. Revealing such a profound and unusual ability could lead to a loss of personal privacy. The intuitive person might be constantly sought after, scrutinized, or even exploited. Keeping the knowledge private would allow them to live a more normal and peaceful life, free from the burdens of others' expectations or demands. And now maybe, when in the past, when I have run into other people and I've discussed psychic abilities, I run into a ton of people who seem to look at it from this just attention seeking position. And, I think if they had psychic abilities, they would instantly reveal it to anybody and everybody as quickly as they could. And I can tell you from personal experience that is most likely a mistake. But there doesn't seem to be any, again, not having them, there doesn't seem to be any forethought on their part about just how scrutinized they would be. Or if somebody realized that they really did have abilities, how much pressure those people could bring to bear. Luckily, the scientific community and most other people don't take psychic abilities seriously enough to really want to exploit somebody. But I would imagine that there might be certain people in defense contracting or military things where if they did find somebody who they knew was talented and reliable, that could be a possibility. The scrutiny, I can tell you, is just, I mean, it's unbearable. It is unbearable. And people think that this has to do with, oh, you can't prove that you're right. For one, psychic perception is just that, it's perception. You don't always know exactly what you're perceiving. It comes through many channels, at least the five that we know of, right? So there's, visual, there's audio, there is kinesthetic, there is picking up of emotions, there's some people consider picking up energy, things like that. You've got to be able to translate that into something manageable. What people who do have psychic abilities tend to know is that they do tend to be right about certain things, like very correct under certain circumstances, especially if they don't have any formal training with how to utilize their abilities or how to make sense of it. They know that they're right on occasion. They also know that they're wrong, and frequently they don't know why. So the trying to talk to somebody or get some type of emotional support or understanding about it usually just winds up leading to more problems than it's worth because, again, you're just constantly accused of having nefarious motives, being an attention seeker. You're just not very good. You're delusional. I mean, you name it, it's thrown your way, especially as an untrained, younger, naive natural psychic. It's not pleasant at all. So, two, the avoidance of fear and prejudice. In many societies, the unknown or the supernatural is met with fear, skepticism, or hostility. The intuitive might be labeled as an outcast, a fraud, or even a threat. They can face social ostracism, persecution, or scientific ridicule. By keeping their abilities secret, they would avoid these negative reactions. Now, I can tell you from just my experience. Now, this is before I learned formal remote viewing, and it was just using Rosicrucian practices to try to get a better understanding of how my psychic abilities worked. I perceived 4.5 years before she got the cancer, I perceived my then wife's cancer diagnosis. And I can tell you that when you perceive something like that about somebody, or it can lead to all kinds of problems. Everything isn't wonderful like everybody thinks. So in my case, well, there were two. There was an avoidable car accident, and there was the cancer diagnosis. I'm going to go over the cancer diagnosis first, even though that happened later. So while I was in meditation, I wasn't asking, I wasn't looking for any of it. I got a revelation one time about my then wife, Rebecca, getting cancer 4.5 years in the future. Now, it's not like I didn't fumble this information. I did. I did make mistakes. And I'm revealing this mainly because I would like other younger, less experienced intuitives to learn from my mistakes. So I was instructed specifically, it came through an audible format, very loud and clear, not to reveal this information to her. Of course, I found that preposterous because thought, well, I can change the outcome here. Why would I not tell her? So I sat on the information for a few months and then wound up telling her about it. And all I can say is that's when all hell broke loose because it was, again, I was surprised. I thought everybody, if there was an avoidable disease you were going to have, everybody would want to know about the information so they could alter course, so they could change their dietary habits. They could do whatever it was to, it'd be like a forecast of the weather, that the weather's, it's going to rain that day. You bring an umbrella with you. There's a high risk for an area that you're going to visit. You do everything you can to properly prepare with the proper equipment. That's what I thought. Not only did Rebecca think that I was trying to kill her and do away with her and that I wanted her dead, she didn't listen to any of my suggestions about getting a gym membership, going for a walk, having us change our diet so that, she was getting better nutrition. Nothing like that. As a matter of fact, she took worse care of herself. And after all of the battles, and there had just been, and I don't mean like they were physical, I just mean they were so loud, so numerous, and so emotionally draining. Just these knockdown, drag out fights about this prophecy of her getting cancer. After a while, I just stopped saying anything. I was just like, I've gone around about this enough. I'm tired of trying to tell you. I'm tired of trying to get you to change your eating habits, whatever, do whatever you want. I just gave up. Sure enough, the year and the month that I had foreseen, she came home from work and said that she had some unusual pain underneath her armpit and that she was going to go get it checked out from the doctor. Now, at that point, I will say this about cancer. I always seem to be able to pick up cancer. It, as far as a color, I always perceive black. It feels like a disruption in a body. It seems to be very, very easy for me to perceive for whatever reason. I knew what it was. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want her trying to tell me I wanted her to die. I was just so exhausted. I was just like, okay, you're going to go to the doctor. She went to the doctor. The doctor decided to go ahead and remove whatever these lumps were. He removed them at the time. He had been a surgeon for 22 years at that point. He said he had never seen anything like it. He didn't know what it was. So he was going to send it away to a laboratory. Now, this is when Rebecca and I had 3 little kids, all under 5. So all of my kids were very young. So we all, we didn't have anybody to watch them. We all had to go to the doctor there with them. So my kids were there, thank God they were a little bit too young to really realize what was going on. But the doctor never used the word cancer, but he did say, when he started discussing treatment options, he did say chemotherapy. And that's when Rebecca knew. That's when she burst into tears. Here I am trying to be as supportive as I can under the circumstances with a woman who thinks I'm trying to kill her. Put me in a very difficult circumstances. I will say this about it. Now, this is one thing that was very interesting because I was, again, specifically instructed not to tell her. And ironically enough, if she had not gone to the doctor, there were tumors that were developing. That's what was taken out of her. They were in her lymph nodes, but they were tumors. And the cancer wound up being a very, very rare type of cancer called sarcomatoid carcinoma. And it moves through the bloodstream and the lymphatic system very, very easily, and it creates tumors as it goes. And the tumors grow so rapidly, so fast, and moves through the system that if Rebecca had come in 2 weeks later, she would have been stage 4 instead of stage 2. That's how fast they were growing. Now, under those circumstances, the doctor, the oncologist, gave us options and said, we can go with a lighter chemotherapy or a heavier chemotherapy. Rebecca and I had gone around about this so many times, and I was just so exhausted. All this, again, was before I learned remote viewing. And she came to me one day and she said, James, I don't want to die. And I said, well, believe it or not, I don't want you to die either. If for nothing else, not to sound completely ruthless, but I really don't look forward to, raising 3 little kids on my own. That would be extremely tough. So she said, will you find out what I can do to beat this? And again, I was just so exhausted from, what seemed to me to be hundreds of fights over that 4 years, literally just hundreds of them. I said, okay, I will go into the meditative state that I know how to do. I'll get my ego out of the way and I'll ask the question. Again, this is before I learned how to remote view. And I said, but I'm only going to do this if you're going to listen. If you're going to fight me on this and you're going to just disregard whatever I say, I'm not, like, this is difficult for me to do. I have to go into a very deep state of altered consciousness in order to get this answer and to get my ego out of the way. If you're not going to listen, I'm not going to do it. It's just not worth it to me. And she said, I'll listen. I'll listen to what you say. I said, okay, fine, I'll go. That night I went and I got into a nice deep state of meditation, and I got the answer very clearly that if she went with the harsher chemotherapy, which would involve rougher treatments and more of them, of the chemotherapy sessions, that she would get a secondary infection and she would be gone. And it was crystal clear. There was no ambiguity. There was no question about it. It wasn't just something I kind of slightly felt. It was like, this is the answer. If she gets that harsher chemotherapy, she's going to get that secondary infection. She will be gone. Her immune system will be compromised. She won't be able to handle it. And that's what she's going to wind up dying from. So I came back and told her. We went to the oncologist, and the oncologist was a really good guy from the Philippines. He couldn't quite tell. I didn't discuss anything with anybody again. At that point, I was just completely concealing that I had psychic abilities. I was so tired of arguing and fighting with everybody about it. But he could tell there was something about me, and he was really trying to encourage us to go with the harsher chemotherapy, because if the sarcomatoid carcinoma comes back in the first year or the first 5 years, if it comes back during that time, it's like a virtual death sentence for the people involved. So he really wanted us to go with the harsher treatment. We were adamant, and luckily Rebecca listened to me and we stuck by it, and we got her the less harsh chemotherapy. Rebecca, at that point we had so many marital problems and all that stuff, almost all of them pertaining to psychic abilities, because I was pushing them away when Rebecca and I got married. It's not like I didn't know I had psychic abilities. Had just been actively pushing them away. And here, I had to embrace them because they weren't going to go away. In some ways, I can't really blame Rebecca. She didn't sign up to be married to a psychic. She signed up to be married to a normal guy. But so she didn't want me to go to her first chemotherapy session with her. And I insisted. I said, no matter what's going on between you and I'm still your husband, and you're not going to participate in one of the scariest things a human being can participate in, getting their first chemotherapy session without somebody. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'll take you. So we did. Now she had 5 other sessions after that. She did arrange for her friends to go with her, and that's fine. I was like, that's what you want to do. I understand. And the bottom line with that is that the cancer did not come back in the first 5 years, which was a really good sign. And that was, I think we're at year 19 of Rebecca being cancer-free, almost 20 years. And I find it ironic, and I'll discuss some of this with one of the other points it brings up about free will, the Gemini thing about reveal or conceal, because there's no doubt about it. I altered the outcome there, because if I would have not said anything to Rebecca, there is no doubt that she would have been stage 4 by the time anything got diagnosed with the cancer, and with the harsher chemotherapy, she would have been gone. So the question of free will comes into play here, and we can alter the outcome of events with psychic perception, with that precognition. There were people in the Mormon church, which I was involved in at the time, who were accusing me, they had caught wind. Rebecca had said something to other people about me, about my prophecy, about her passing away. There were people who came and told me that I was going to kill my wife with the suggestion and all this other stuff, like basically accusing me, not directly of witchcraft, but of giving her the suggestion she was going to get cancer, and that's what caused her to get cancer, which I find hilarious. I mean, really, to think that somebody could get cancer or not get cancer based solely on suggestion is a little silly. I mean, suggestion, there's no doubt about it. Hypnosis and suggestion can have some power, but to think that somebody's going to get a deadly disease based solely on suggestion is more than a little ridiculous. I just don't think we human beings are that powerful. So I got punished plenty for revealing any of this. The only payoff was that Rebecca did not die. 3, this goes into the ethical consideration of free will. If an intuitive person can see the future, they might be tempted to interfere, which I did. However, intervening could disrupt the natural course of events and potentially infringe on the free will of others. For example, if they see someone is about to make a bad decision, telling them might prevent them from learning a valuable life lesson. Keeping the knowledge to themselves would be a way of respecting the autonomy of others. Again, I could have respected Rebecca's autonomy under the circumstances. I could have followed the instructions I specifically got. I really do think that some of that guidance was more to save me from some of the grief and social repercussions and years of fighting, literally, based around that revelation. Now, maybe at a later date, closer to when she actually got cancer, I would have been given other instructions to reveal it to her so that we could change things. I don't know because I didn't follow that course. The fourth item here for concealment is the burden of responsibility. Having knowledge of the future or the inner thoughts of others would come as an immense burden. Of that, you can be sure. The intuitive person might feel a moral obligation to prevent tragedies or help those in need, even at great personal cost. This could lead to burnout, emotional distress, and a sense of constant responsibility. Concealment would be a way to manage this burden. If, and I've said this many, many times, even to people who come to me for psychic readings, if I did not have a calling to do this, I would conceal it. I did go through a period when I was first learning remote viewing. I took down my website. I got rid of the first account that I used to market my abilities online. And I literally lied to people who came when the topic of psychic abilities came up. I literally lied and said, all that stuff. I literally lied. And it was the single most peaceful period of time in my life, in my adult life, that I've ever had. Despite the attention whores out there thinking that having psychic abilities would be this great, glorious thing. And maybe my cousin was showing me something about what the medium Matt Frazier on Facebook, and he's revealing all this mediumistic information that he's getting from these people and talking about things. And I saw as well, I watched a video yesterday about Casadega, which is relatively close to where I live in Florida, Casadega Spiritualist Camp, and saw some ladies on this video coming up with somebody's first name, their favorite flower, the message they had for the loved one, which made complete sense to them. I mean, just all this amazing information. There's no way, that somebody could come, but they're just guessing, just pure coincidence. But there were people in the YouTube comments going on about that. It's just coincidence. It's not that big of a deal. Just ridiculing the psychics up one side, the mediums up one side and down the other. And this is the stuff where I look at it and I just go, it's funny whenever you say something about having psychic abilities, everybody wants a display. And my experience has been, if I display what I know and I tell them things that there's no way I could possibly know about them, I'm going to scare the out of them. And I know from experience, based on this in the past, that chances that they're going to continue being my friend or wanting to have anything to do with me beyond that's really slim. I've lost a lot of friends over the years, not because I was wrong, but because I was right. So I kind of put this informal code up where I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything. I think I would rather have people believe I'm a bad psychic and just not scare the hell out of them. Then, of course, it's like, well, see, you can't do it. You're just completely, I mean, all of this stuff, it's so ungodly wearing. It's just exhausting. So God bless Matt Frazier and some of the psychics out there who are extroverted and who love to go over this stuff and they love discussing it and they can be out there and they can be this amazingly dynamic person offering all this information. I'm an introvert, and as much as I want to be of service, that has not been my experience at all. Not at all. So what I have told people over the years when they've been my friends is, look, at some point it's going to become obvious when I say something or do something, I'm going to wind up revealing that there's things about you that I shouldn't know. And hopefully you'll be okay with that, not feel too uncomfortable when I'm trying to give you advice about something. And that's enough. We don't need the sideshow or the parlor tricks to get this point across. And I understand why people want to see it, but at the same time, even when that's done, even when there were some people years and years ago, I gave some of the most magnificent psychic readings I've ever given in my life before I started charging for them. And I was utterly shocked. I mean, I told people names of people who had died. I brought through their dead relatives. I told them all kinds of, I gave them some of the most amazing information. And I think some of it's because they didn't pay for it, because people don't appreciate what they don't pay for. But I had some of those people turn around and say some of the nastiest things about me and turn around and be the meanest people to me under other really soon after I had given them this amazing amount of information. Yet when you get punished like that on a regular basis, it does not encourage you in the slightest to want to continue revealing this information. So I'm going to go on now. And I realize this is kind of self indulgent because I'm basically griping about this, about conceal or reveal thing. But I do want people to understand that it's much more nuanced and it's much more complex than people want to admit. Just thinking it's just this superficial, oh, you'd be famous, you'd be like, I can assure you there are a ton of mediums out there who are really good. They're really amazing. They're not on Facebook. They're not doing the Matt Frazier thing. They're not out there because they don't have the temperament for it. They can't just disregard all the criticism and all the nitpicking and all the scrutiny and all the other nonsense that goes along with being a public figure like that. So anyway, let's look at the continue reading this, the arguments for displaying the knowledge. One, the potential for greater good. If an intuitive person could use their abilities to prevent harm, solve crime, or guide humanity toward a better future, there would be a strong ethical argument to do so. A clear example would be a psychic who could prevent a natural disaster, although natural disasters are pretty big usually. I don't know how somebody could prevent one per se, but prevent a natural disaster or stop a terrorist attack. The potential for saving lives and improving the world might outweigh the personal costs. I'm not quite sure about that. I mean, just look at Dead Zone, Stephen King's book and the movie. There's a ton of examples of people who have been intuitive, who could see the future trying to prevent something. And yeah, great personal cost that's an understatement. Sometimes it can cost people their lives for trying to serve the greater good. The advancement of science and understanding. The existence of verifiable psychic ability would revolutionize our understanding of consciousness, physics, and the human mind. By openly displaying their abilities, the intuitive could contribute to groundbreaking scientific research, leading to new technologies and a deeper comprehension of the universe. I would love to believe in this one. I really would. But the fact of the matter is that science is not without scientists are people, and they're not without their prejudices and their biases about things. Science is still very steeped in materialism. And although it's getting better and it's getting a little bit looser as we begin to explore quantum mechanics and things like that and get a better understanding of how the universe works on a subatomic level, the fact of the matter is that there are very few scientists who would actually be open-minded enough to actually investigate what's going on with psychic perception. I'm not saying it can't be done. Nobody will do it at one point. But I dare say probably in the entire United States, there's probably a handful of scientists who would actually be willing to go through the trouble with the proper protocols in a scientific environment, hooking somebody up to the proper equipment, monitoring them, watching. It's laborious. It's very intense work. And I really doubt that there's very many scientists who would take any of this seriously enough. They probably would want to try to do everything they could to prove the person claiming intuitive powers, that they were just fake or they were delusional or whatever the deal was. And in fact, I'm not saying you have to believe in psychic abilities to make them work, but let's face it, almost anything when it's being tested or scrutinized by that, when you've got heavy skepticism about something that is supposed to be at least partially, it's not just a raw perceptive ability, but some of it might be based on at least being open enough to take a look at it. The psychological pressure could yield negative results. Again, I'm not saying somebody has to believe that it works, but they at least have to be open enough to set up a test properly to be able to really look and see if any type of phenomena or any type of maybe energy that we're not used to measuring that a psychic might put out. They would have to be open enough to be able to do that. And I just don't think, I would love to think that there would be scientists who would be neutral enough to be able to do that. I just don't think there are very many of them. It would be fantastic if there were, but there is, I would look, again, I can't look Science has done wonderful things for our society, but science is not the end all and be all. It is a process of discovery, and things that were considered absolutely indisputable in the past have been proven wrong. And it would be nice if scientists approach science with a more open fashion. But the fact of the matter is, they approach science a lot of times like a priesthood, and they have their agenda, and they want to prove one particular thing or another, and they're not necessarily going to be open to any contradictory information. It'd be wonderful if they did. I would participate in some scientific studies like that if I really felt, and of course, part of this would be my intuition, right? That the scientists involved and the people involved, the people funding it or whatever, whoever the people involved were actually open enough to actually take a look at what I was capable of perceiving under certain circumstances and what I was not capable of perceiving with the proper protocols, and willing to say, yep, yep, there was actually extrasensory perception here. There was actual precognition here. Here is where it did not work. Here is where it did. That would be wonderful. I don't think with materialistic minded science at the moment, I don't think there's anything like that that's going to come about, but it's a wonderful thought in a fantasy world. It's a wonderful thought. I'd love to see it happen. I don't think I'll see it happen in my lifetime. 3, building trust and community. If abilities are used for healing, guidance, or fostering empathy, they could be a powerful tool for building trust and community. The intuitive person could act as a counselor, a spiritual guide, helping individuals navigate difficult emotions and make better decisions. In this scenario, displaying the knowledge could be a way for helping others directly. Now, this is some of this goes on during when you are marketing yourself as a psychic, when you have clients who are willing to come to you and ask you the questions, and you put on your little display and they can see that there's something extrasensory going on. Sure, you can help them a little bit. Like, I consider it more like coaching with their relationships and things like that. And there's a lot of things I can understand about somebody's motives or their emotions or what they're likely to do in the future. We genuinely do have free will. People are not locked in. They're not automatons. So, and if I had to give a rough estimate, I would say that about 80% of somebody's life is free will, and about 20% of it is what we would consider to be predestined, or like it's going to happen. Certain things, birth of children, certain diseases that somebody's going to get, that sometimes those things really do seem to be, they either seem to have been arranged or agreed upon somewhere else other than here. But, even then, psychic abilities are not a magic bullet. Like, I can't guarantee somebody that I'm going to be able to help their relationship work out because I can perceive what their lover's motive is, what they're likely to do in the future, or how they really feel about them. That's not a magic bullet. I still have to coach them through that and hope that I can make their relationship work. Somebody who's asking about business stuff, I can tell them what their business partner's thinking. Ironically enough, I have a sizable number of clients who are attorneys, and one of them he's extremely analytical, and he probably utilizes me what I consider to be the best for what he does, where he's asking me what the judge think. He gives me the name of the judge. I'm able to tap in, see what the judge is going to think about the particular case, tap into other attorneys, the opposing counsel, and things like that. I'm able to read that like a book. And I think he probably utilizes the information that I give him probably the best way that I see almost anybody utilizing the information. So again, I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice, but I can certainly help them peer into the minds of their colleagues and the judges and give them the best information to make the best decisions possible. But again, this is very abstract. All of this stuff having to do with using empathy and trying to help people improve their relationships. This is all it's ambiguous at best, because we're dealing with real people and relationships are messy. So again, it's not a magic bullet. Just because somebody has me involved doesn't mean their relationship's going to work out. I'll do my best, but you're dealing with another messy human being. 4, personal integrity and honesty. Living a lie and constantly hiding a fundamental part of oneself can be a heavy emotional burden. Displaying the ability might be a matter of personal integrity, allowing the intuitive person to live an authentic life without deception. This is probably I think, the least poignant point. Yes, in some ways it would be better. For instance, when I think about it, sure, it would be better if we lived in a society where, like in the United States, between the scientism, if I can call it that, and the Puritan ideal that was set up when the country was founded, that there is no more revelation from heaven. The Bible is all you need. You shouldn't be getting any answers to prayers. Like all that stuff that's anti-psychic, so to speak, is kind of built into the culture. Would it be better if American culture was more open to this stuff? Yeah, that would certainly make my life a lot easier. I don't necessarily want to or need to be accepted by everybody or approved by everybody. What I would like is not to be discriminated, scrutinized, and ostracized by everybody. That would be nice. So, in conclusion, the Gemini document says the decision is not a simple one. If psychic abilities were real, the better choice would depend on the specific nature of the abilities and the temperament of the individual. For abilities that are deeply personal and not quantifiable, example, empathy, a gut feeling about people, keeping this knowledge private might be the best option to protect one's peace and avoid skepticism. And man, oh man, I will tell you what, when you're telepathic and you can perceive what other people are thinking, God, the skepticism gets wearing fast. It really gets so wearing because you're not only dealing with the other person's what they're willing to display and react, you're dealing with their thoughts and oh, it's just, it's a lot. For abilities that could prevent large scale harm, example, precognition of disasters, a moral obligation to reveal knowledge would be very strong, even with personal risks. I'm not sure about this. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say that I knew that an airplane would crash upon landing at a particular location. Let's say I was able to tap in and get that information. You do realize what would happen, right? With this, if I was able to predict that, then there would be people who would be claiming that I actually brought down the aircraft. They were witchcraft. That's what they would be. They'd be saying, see, he knew it was going to happen. He did something telekinetically. He messed up something on it. He made it come down. There'd be people accusing me of using demons to make it happen. Then even the people who believed that I couldn't actually do something like that actively, there would be people going, well, I mean, if you could see that the airplane was coming down, why couldn't you go back and actually tap in and see which mechanical part of the airplane failed when the plane crashed? And then if you could do that, again, this is the scrutiny part, right? And if you could do that, then why couldn't you go all the way back to the manufacturer where they were manufacturing that particular part, where that particular mechanic was working on that particular part, and prevent them from manufacturing that defective part that caused the crash, right? There's no end to this stuff. Like there's no end to the scrutiny and the constant criticism of stuff like this. If you put yourself out like this, if anybody's ever dumb enough to do this, and I certainly won't be one of them, I'll tell you that, that's exactly what you would get from the general public. You would literally get crucified for not being a god. And as much as people want to accuse me of being this incredibly arrogant person, I'm not God. I'm not a god. I do not know all the answers. This is an extrasensory perceptive skill, and I'm learning as well. And remote viewing has taught me a lot. But I guarantee the chances of me going back and being able to find out exactly where in a manufacturing process a defective item having to do with the landing gear of an airplane, chances of me being able to find that is almost zero. Like no matter how perceptive I am. But again, this is the kind of scrutiny and criticism that somebody who has psychic abilities opens themselves up to. So I'm not quite sure that this is preventing large scale harm is necessarily a justification. For abilities that could be scientifically studied and verified, displaying the knowledge for the sake of scientific advancement would be a powerful and potentially world-changing act. And again, if I felt like somebody was going to be genuine with me, if they were going to be neutral, if they were actually going to measure things properly, because I know that I have psychic abilities. I'm not claiming to always be right. I'm not claiming to always be able to understand what I'm perceiving. But if somebody was going to be hooking me up to a bunch of scientific equipment, having me go through all this physically uncomfortable things to be able to test this stuff, I would sure like it if they were open enough to actually measure it properly and say, okay, this is when the phenomena is occurring. This is under what circumstance. Epic got enough sleep that night. He had, all the factors that could go into increasing perception right there. And the fact of the matter is, whenever you're dealing with anything with psychic abilities, again, people expect you to be like it's always on. You're always accurate. A lack of sleep should never affect you. A lack of the proper vitamins should never affect you. The fact that you didn't get to meditate, that should never affect you. I mean, you're just automatically, it's just everybody always goes back to the ridiculous statement from Carl Sagan, which I don't think applies here at all. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence. You're dealing with human beings. Human beings are not machines. There are times when you're dealing with psychic phenomena when the phenomena manifests and we can measure it. We could measure at least something going on there. It doesn't mean it's happening all the time. And there may be any number, because you're dealing with a human being, a messy human being, remember, any number of times where it may manifest and we might be able to measure it. And then other times it doesn't show up and we might not exactly know why. But it sure would be nice if we could start studying it. I would really enjoy that if we could ever get to that point, but I really doubt anybody's going to be interested enough. It's just easier to dismiss the entire thing. So, this document concludes with ultimately the question highlights the conflict between individual well-being and the potential for greater good. The intuitive person would have to weigh the heavy burden of responsibility and the potentially negative circumstances against the immense potential for positive change. And like I said, I've got to go back to the year and a half, 2 years there where I went completely underground. It was some of the most restful time of my life. And I know that people are going to be like, well, why don't you just shut up about it then? Why are you bothering to put any of this out? If it's such a burden and it's such a problem for you, just keep your mouth shut. I would love to, except that I feel like I have a calling. The other thing is, I feel somewhat responsible for the other natural psychics out there who are struggling with this. I will be teaching here probably before the end of the year, but definitely after the first of the year, if not before. I'm going to get together a group of people and teach them remote viewing. And remote viewing is really reliable. It's very repeatable. It's not always 100%. Every once in a while you crash and burn, but there is a learning curve with it, and it is incredibly effective. And I'm going to teach people how to remote view. And I would like to, honestly, I would like to teach hundreds of people over the next few years so that they can properly utilize their abilities to improve their life. Now, if they want to go out and tell other people that they're psychic, that's their deal. Maybe, but maybe they should remote view their own optimal trajectory first and see if that's the case, if they should put it out there. But I'll be honest with you, my general counsel, my general advice is going to be learn it, master it, and keep it to yourself. Use it to improve your life, use it to improve the life of the people around you. And that's about it. Or my daughter has seen enough of this to know that there's something going on. I don't think she'd ever say, my dad's always right by any stretch of the imagination. She's seen me when I've been wrong about something as well. But I think that my daughter knows I'm right enough where she says to me on occasion when something pops up and I have said, do you want to know like what's going to happen here? And she says, no, I don't. I don't want to know. Now and I don't tell her because she doesn't want to know. So there are other times when something will pop up when maybe it would be, if somebody was a skilled remote viewer, maybe it would be better to guide, a friend or a child or a lover or somebody along certain circumstances where that's going to be their optimal. That's really where they need to be. It's going to be where they're going to, whatever job it is, whatever vocation it is, location, anything in there that's going to really optimize their well-being, their happiness, their fulfillment, things like that. Sure, you could guide them that way. Generally speaking, I would probably say keep a lot of this to yourself. Learn the skills, master it, without all the crazy scrutiny and all the constant fighting and all the nonsense and you have to deal with as a natural psychic and a skilled remote viewer, and just use it as best you can quietly. That would be my suggestion. Now, again, if somebody looks at their optimal trajectory using the remote viewing skill and they see that they're supposed to be out there teaching and they're supposed to be out there doing the Matt Frazier thing and telling everybody about it, hey, knock yourself out, man. If that's really what you want to do, if you've got the temperament for that, that's fantastic. But generally speaking, even though I'm going to teach somebody a fantastic skill that's repeatable and amazing and works the vast majority of the time, gives them excellent information, helps them make some of the best decisions of their life, I'm going to be telling them, keep it to yourself, keep it quiet. So that's my rant for today about psychic abilities. I will still get irritated in the future when somebody says, prove it to me, prove it. Still going to get irritated as because sure, I could scare the hell out of them and serve. No, one, it takes a significant amount of effort. Two, I'm going to scare the hell out of them. Like, why bother? It's just whatever. I get really, really sick of the parlor tricks. I mean, because again, I've seen it happen 1,000 times. You could come up with somebody's name. You could come up with information. There is no way you could know. You could have 5, 6 data points that somebody could go, oh my God, that's so amazing. If they want to disbelieve, they'll go talk themselves out of it the next day. They'll say it was all lucky guess. It was all this. I mean, to be blunt, from an intuitive point of view, why bother? Why bother with that nonsense? If you want to think it doesn't work, you want to keep your mind closed to it and say, none of this works. You're delusional. Okay, fine. I'm delusional. You got it, man. Have a good one. See you later. Anyway, that's my rant for today. And yeah, I think I'm going to try to focus more on some relationship questions in the future here on the Epic Mercury channel. I was trying to put some stuff out on the Psychic Recon channel, and man, oh man, getting some of that stuff verified and doing some stuff is a absolutely pain in the rear. I'm probably just going to wind up posting most of my stuff, even though the algorithm's going to have trouble figuring out what my channel's about. So I'll be posting some more remote viewing stuff, probably shorts with the remote viewing revelations, and getting into more relationship issues because, to be honest with you, even though I'm fascinated by psychic abilities, there's way more people having relationship problems right now. And we are so unbelievably lost in the Western world. It's not even funny with how to improve our relationships. And that's not always a psychic thing per se, being able to tap into how somebody's feeling or thinking. Some of this is just wisdom over the years of just trying to help with their relationships and seeing what works and what doesn't. So I'm going to be getting into some of that in the future, and hopefully you guys will listen, and we'll see where the Epic Mercury YouTube channel goes. Ciao.